Hello. We're going to go over Sql. This is week 8. So, what is Sql? It is a structured query language, right? It allows us to interact with a database. It's an organized collection of structured information. It allows us to retrieve information, put information in the database, delete that information, and update the information in the database. We'll take a look at Sql here. So, Sql stands for a structured query language. It lets you access and manipulate databases, and it became a standard of the American National Standards Institute in 1986. What can we do? We can execute queries against a database, retrieve data from a database, insert records into that database, and update the records in that database. We can also delete the records from the database and create new databases, new tables, and store procedures within that database. So, we have the concept of relational and non-relational databases. That relational database means that we have relationships between our tables. So, in this documentation, we can see that a relational database is a collection of data items with predefined relationships between them. These items are organized as a set of tables with columns and rows, and tables are used to hold information about the objects to be represented in the database. Each column in the table holds a certain kind of data and field which stores the actual value of an attribute. Then we have the concept of non-relational databases. So, a non-relational database is a database that does not use the tabular schema of rows and columns found in most traditional database systems. Instead, non-relational databases use a storage model that is optimized for the specific requirements of the type of data being stored. So, for example, data may be stored as simple key value pairs, as JSON documents, or as a graph consisting of edges and vertices. All right, we'll take a look at MySQL. We can use Maria for this as well. So MariaDB allows you to get started with MySQL. MariaDB Server is an open source innovation, and it allows you to get set up with SQL and start working quickly. All you have to do is go through this process and download the database server to your system. So we'll go over basics. Columns are a set of data values of a particular type. Rows are data records within a table. Let's take a look at tables here. So in this case, we can create a table. Each one of these is going to have a column associated with it. Then we have an example. In this case, we're creating a table person, and we have a person ID, a last name, a first name, an address, and a city. So that table consists of columns and rows. We have our table, then we have a column for each one, and then we have a row in each one of those tables, right? We can select from that table. When we select that, we'll get back a set of rows and columns that allow us to see our data. So, why do I care? SQL is a structured query language that allows you to access and manipulate databases. What do I need? W3 schools and MySQL. How do I do it? This example will show you how to download and install MySQL Workbench. It will also show you how to set up a local MySQL connection. Just go through the steps here. So what if, what about? A type of relational database that stores and provides access to data that are related to one another is a relational database. Okay. Here's an example showing a relational database. We have the customer ID, a primary key to the customers table, and a foreign key to the orders table. All we really need to know are 7 rules for working with databases. So, we want to think about nouns, combine similar models, and we want to keep things simple and stable, and think visually, right? Compute what you can and match what you present. Don't over-engineer it. Start small. Now we'll go over Sql data types. These are the only ones you really need to concern yourself with. We have an integer, a tiny int, a big int, a float, a varchar, text, character, and date, right? We need that integer to specify an ID. We can use a tiny int for optimizing the storage in the database, or we could use a big int for the same reason. Right? The date value is very important because it allows us to create a timestamp associated with a record. And then the text will allow us to store a very large amount of text in a database. And we also have Varchar, which we can use to save characters in our database. Okay, so we have date time, a timestamp, and then a bit. This binary bit allows us to store a 1 or a 0, which is very useful because we want to check in our data if this attribute is true or false. We can associate a bit with it. So why do I care? Sql data types specify the type of data a value can hold. For example, the int type only allows numeric values without a decimal place. What do I need? W3 schools, a database management system, and the documentation for it. In this example, we want to use MySQL, right? That's what we're going to get familiar with. So how do I do it? Here's an example where you can create a table and add data to this table. What if, what about? What does Varchar store? Okay, it can contain letters, numbers, and special characters. That variable length string, the maximum size of that is up to 65,000 characters. It can be from 0 to 65,000 characters. All right, so we have SQL servers. These can be installed on our personal machine, in the cloud, or we can use local development, right? And if we use local development, we can use Xampp, WAMP, or MAMP, and we just supply the default credentials for connecting. So why do I care? SQL servers are an important concept. There are many types of servers. A cloud server allows you to store your database in the cloud, and you can access the database from any computer. And what do I need? A server type, just a cloud server, maybe your local machine, however you want to configure it, and the documentation for the selected server type. How do I do it? This example will show you how to install Xampp. So let's go into management, right? We can manage that database from the terminal, right? All we have to do is enter the MySQL command and we can connect to the database. We can also use the desktop tooling that's available, so MySQL Workbench or Phpmyadmin. Why do I care? The management aspect of SQL allows you to manipulate data. It's a way for you to pull data, optimize your queries. You can see what's coming back. It's the management aspect of this, right? We want to use a GUI. We want to be able to see what we're working with here. So what do I need? Really your choice of management system. It could be a terminal. It could be a desktop application like Xampp or Workbench. The preferred one is Workbench. How do I do it? So this example will show you how to use MySQL Workbench to create an enhanced entity relationship model. The steps are continued on this slide, right? Just go through and work through these steps. So what if, what about? What are some pros of using SQL in a desktop application? Provides you syntax highlighting, output logging, and you can open multiple SQL tabs at the same time, and code auto-completion. Here are the steps for creating a database, using a database, selecting it, creating a table, and showing that table, and then showing the databases associated with this system, right? We can show databases, and we can see all the databases within the system. Then we also have the ability to drop and delete a table. So why do I care? Databases are important. A few things that a database allows you to do is create data, group data. You can group it by a name, an address, a credit card information, or purchase history, for example. What do I need? W3 schools and MySQL. How do I do it? Open up Workbench, create a new MySQL tab for executing queries, and insert the following. Create database, if not exists, temporary database. The if not exists statement will prevent an error from occurring if a database already exists with that name. What if, what about? How do I see a list of all databases? Use show databases command to list all databases. we can get into our database using Workbench. So we want to download Workbench and configure it so that we can connect to it locally. Right? It allows us to design, develop, and administer our database. We can also look at the performance as well. Another useful tool is Xampp. Xampp is another desktop tool that can be used for interacting with the database. You have to configure the htdocs, the server, which is an Apache server, and follow the directions for getting Xampp set up. So why do I care? Xampp is a free, easy to install Apache distribution containing MariaDB, PHP, and Perl. What do I need? Xampp and the associated documentation. How do I do it? This example shows you how to check the current PHP version included with Xampp. All right, now we'll look at Phpmyadmin. What is Phpmyadmin? So, Phpmyadmin is a free software tool written in PHP, and it's intended to handle the administration of MySQL over the web. It allows you to monitor the aspects of your database once you get it set up. Essentially, all you have to do is just work through the documentation for Phpmyadmin. It's a mature project. There's a lot of documentation out there, and it shows you how to use this database tool. So why do I care? PHP is a free software tool written in the scripting language PHP. Its intended use is to handle the administration of the MySQL server over the web. What do I need? Phpmyadmin and MySQL. How do I do it? This example will show you how to use Phpmyadmin to create a database and a table. So, once we have that set up, we can start working with CRUD. What is CRUD? It's the ability to create, read, update, and delete. So what is CRUD? CRUD is the ability to create, read, update, and delete. So, we know that we can use MySQL, and it's a structured query language. We can create, read, update, and delete. The syntax for creating a table is create table, and then we pass in the column name, and the column type, and the constraints. Okay? This allows us to create that table. We can use this table and then select from it as well. Then we can update the table, right? All we have to do is alter the table, and we can change student and modify the variable type for a specific column. And then we can continue going down here. After we've updated the table, we can perform a delete operation. We specify the delete command, and that allows us to delete a specific record where a value is equal to a certain amount. So, CRUD is an acronym that stands for create, read, update, and delete. So the insert into statement is used to insert new records into that table. The select statement is used to read data from the database, and the update statement is used to modify the existing records in the table. We can alter the table, which allows us to update it, right? We can alter and add a column or modify a variable name. So why do I care? These are the four most basic operations that you will use when you work with a database. What do I need? W3 schools, MySQL. How do I do it? You may have to start the server again. So in Windows, open the Task Manager, scroll down to MySQL on the right, and click MySQL and click Start. For Mac, go to System Preferences, click the MySQL logo, and start the MySQL server. So this example is continued here, right? This allows you to insert and update the data in that database. So we can delete by running this command as well. So what about? How do I delete a database? Simply run drop database with a database name. Then we have Sql Logical Operators. So the logical operators for Sql are add, subtract, multiply, divide, and modulo. We also have bitwise and, bitwise or, and bitwise exclusive or, and then the standard Boolean operations equals, greater than, less than, greater than equal, less than or equal to, and not equal to. So why do I care? Sql Logical Operators allow you to store queries in a specific way using the AND logical operator. Every operation is separated by the and must be true. So what do I need? W3 Sqls in MySQL. How do I do it? Run these commands. And what if, what about? How do I use a not operator? Well, we can select from a table where something is not true. So in this case, a cat breed is not Siberian. Here are some advanced selection queries that we can run. So we can order by, ascending or descending order. We can concatenate those columns, and we can select distinct columns, the unique columns from a table. And then we can specify specific columns between certain values or where they're like a certain value using that like matching pattern. So why do I care? Advanced SQL selectors gives you more control in your select statements. The order by clause allows you to order a result set in descending order or ascending order. So what do I need? W3 Sqls in MySQL. How do I do it? Well, we can insert this command into MySQL, and we should get back a display of all cats with the cat that has the highest cat ID. So what if, what about? How do I use the in operator in a select statement? So in this case, this selects all cats with the name Loki and Misty. All right, now we'll touch on primary and foreign keys. As we saw in the 7 rules of databases, this is not necessarily something that you're going to be working with a lot in industry unless you become a database administrator. So, a primary key constraint. The primary key constraint uniquely identifies each record in a table, right? Primary keys must contain unique values and cannot contain null values. A table can have only one primary key, and in the table, this primary key can consist of single or multiple column fields. A foreign key, the foreign key constraint is used to prevent actions that would destroy links between tables. A foreign key is a field or collection of fields in one table that refers to a primary key in another table. So, now we'll discuss Sql Join. So, we want to select columns from different tables. In this case, we run select from and then inner join table 2 on table 1. In this case, where table 1's ID is equal to table 2's ID. These can be represented in this diagram here, in this Venn diagram, right? We have a left join, a full outer join, and a left join, and an inner join, and a right join. Right? The left join in this case is going to take the intersection of the two tables, and it'll give us the other table. In the full outer join, we're going to pull back everything. This is the union of everything here. And then we have our left join, which does not take the intersection. And then our inner join is the shared data in between those tables. And then a right join is the same thing as a left join, except in this case, it's going to be matched with the right side. Then we have a right join if null. This avoids selecting the intersection. So, why do I care? Primary keys and foreign keys are important concepts of SQL. For a primary key, the primary key constraint uniquely identifies each record in a table. They must contain unique values and cannot contain null values. For a foreign key, the foreign key constraint is used to prevent actions that would destroy links between tables. A foreign key is a field or multiple fields in one table that refers to the primary key in a different table. So what do I need? W3 Sqls in MySQL in a table to store the primary key or foreign key. How do I do it? This example shows how to use the join statement. So we're going to go on to the next slide to look at the next steps for this example. So here we're selecting by the ID here from a category, and we're joining on the product P table. So this example uses a table alias to join the tables. So what if, what about? How do I create a primary key when creating a table in MySQL? The first way, use the primary key constraint when you first declare the column. Other useful SQL functions. Count will return the number of rows that matches a specified criterion. Min returns the smallest value of the selected column, and max returns the largest value of the selected column. Uppercase and lowercase perform lowercase and uppercase operations, and then sum returns the total sum of a numeric collection, and then now returns the time as in right now, and exists will return true if something actually exists. So other useful SQL commands are group by, and then we have Phpmyadmin. We can specify a trigger. That trigger will go off if a specific query is launched. And it also allows us to export databases. So we can take an entire database and export it into a file. From a security perspective, this is very dangerous. It allows a hacker to gain access to all of the data in the database. So why do I care? SQL functions allow you to manipulate data with less code. The concat function allows you to join two or more string columns or literal values. What do I need? W3 schools and MySQL. How do I do it? Insert the following command into your editor. Select concat ws, and then fill in the rest. What if, what about? What is an aggregate function? An aggregate function performs a calculation on a set of values and returns a single value. So in this case, sum is an example of an aggregate function. It'll take the total and it will return one single value. All right, now we'll look at Express in MySQL. So to get started with this, we want to have Express installed, and then we want to add the MySQL module to our code. To connect to the database, we're going to use mysql.createConnection, and we'll specify the host name, the username, the password, and the database. And then the next step is to run mysql.connect. We can execute a query by calling the query method on the MySQL object, since it's now connected to the database. So why do I care? Express allows you to connect databases to Express applications. This gives our application rich interactivity, allows us to save and query user data. What do I need? Express, the Express documentation in MySQL. How do I do it? Run through this example. So if you receive an error not supported auth mode, client does not support authentication protocol requested by the server, simply complete the following. We need to go to Stack Overflow. There could be an issue with MySQL 8, right? In this case, someone is trying to connect to the database. Here's the error that you get back in command prompt. And then here is the solution that you need to run. This example is continued here. So what if, what about? How do I connect MySQL to Express? Well, we just saw. We just have to run that connect method and pass in the variables specified for the database. All right, now we'll look at EJS. EJS is a template engine that allows us to create templates to save the amount of code that we have to use with our application, right? This is a scriptlet tag and allows for flow control with no output, right? This outputs the value into the template, HTML escaped. This outputs the unescaped value into the template. So you need to install EJS. It's very simple. Just run npm install EJS, pass an EJS and a template string into some data, and then you have HTML. So here's a way that you can get this all set up in a CLI. Here is an example of a template, right? This checks if a user exists, and if so, then print that user.name. And here's how we can specify that template. Why do I care? EJS is an embedded JavaScript template. It's a simple templating language that allows you to generate HTML markup with plain JavaScript. What do I need? EJS and EJS documentation. What if, what about? How do I install EJS with npm? Simply run npm install EJS. All right, that concludes week 8.